Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. Now when we're playing melody lines, we're playing lead lines over chords, we have to think about how the notes from the scale that we're playing from, how they relate to the underlying chords, so there's a harmonic interaction between the melody and the underlying chords. But when you're constructing melody lines, you also need to think about how the notes in that lead line relate to each other and how the melody flows. So thinking about the intervals between the notes. Now, I've done a series of tutorials before about intervals. I'll put some links in the information section down there if you want to have a look at those, if you're not too familiar with the theory and that behind intervals. But what I want to talk about in this video is sort of visualizing those intervals on the guitar neck. So not just thinking so much about how, intervals of a major second, minor third, whatever, how they sound, but also how they look, so you can see on the fingerboard with the way the notes are laid out and navigate around with your fingers and when you're playing melody lines. What I've also done is I've done like a reference sheet, which I'll also put a link to down there in the information section, which is really, this video is kind of explaining what that sheet's trying to illustrate. So let's start off with the most basic interval. No real interval at all, the interval of unison, just the same note. It always looks like this. It starts on a note and finishes on the same note. It doesn't matter where you are, it always looks like this. An interval of one semitone. Again, this is a fairly obvious one. You start on one note and you go up by a fret and you get the next note, so that's a open-ended unison or a minor second, depending on the context that you're playing it in, but it's a one semitone interval. Doesn't matter where you are, it always sounds like a one semitone interval, and it always has that look to it. Two semitone interval again is a fairly straightforward one to visualise, because typically you're starting on one note and going up by two semitones, two frets. It always looks like this. Obviously you could skip strings and whatnot, but generally if you're playing a two semitone interval, you'll play something that looks like this. Now you might be looking at this and thinking, well, this is all a bit obvious, but start to think about some bigger intervals and things get a little bit more interesting. Take a three semitone interval, like a minor third interval. You could say it's three semitones. It's three frets, it looks like that. Always playing three semitone interval on one string. But you could, because the interval's starting to get a bit bigger, play that interval over two strings. So you could start on a note here and go up by three semitones, which would take you to here. Now that three semitone interval, whichever two notes you're playing it between, always looks like this, unless you're playing it on the second and third string, in which case it looks like this. A four semitone interval is getting a little bit harder to play just on one string because the stretch is getting a bit big. It's doable, but generally you probably want to be playing an interval of major third, this four semitone interval, over two strings. Now over two strings it always looks like this, unless you're playing it on the second and third string, in which case it looks like this. Perfect fourth, five semitone interval, always looks like this, unless you're playing it on the second and third string, in which case it looks like this. So hopefully you can see what I'm trying to convey here is the idea of the way an interval, because it always has the same sound, it has the same number of semitones between the two notes, it'll always have the same sort of geometrical layout on the neck. So what I've done is there's a companion sheet for this tutorial, which I'll put a link to in the information section down there, which shows you all the intervals from unison right the way through to an octave and how they look on the guitar neck. And what you need to be able to do is to visualise not just the notes of the scale, but the relationships between the notes in the scale. So let's say, for argument's sake, you're playing in a major key and you're using this scale to take notes from to play a melody line. Being able to see that there's a second degree in there and there's a fourth degree in there, knowing that the interval between those two notes is a minor third, you can see what that geometric shape looks like and recognise that as being the interval of 3 semitones or a minor third. Now eventually this should become almost like an unconscious competency. You know how intervals are laid out and you would be able to play them automatically. But it's useful to be able to think about the relationships between the notes, rather than just saying, oh, I know I can take notes from a scale and I'll see how they sound against the chord. That gives you the harmonic element, but you need to think about the melodic element as well, and the relationships between those notes as you're going up and down through the notes in the melody line. And of course rhythm is important as well, so the timing and the phrasing of those notes as well, but that's not necessarily something I want to cover in this video. So there's plenty for you to practice there. Like I said, there's the information sheet which you can download from there. So spend a bit of time looking at that, playing the intervals and getting your ear used to the way that the different intervals sound, which is a useful skill both for composing your own lead lines and also for picking up other people's melodies and working out what notes are in there, because you can hear the different distances between the notes and work out what the melody line is. As always, if you've got any questions or you want to make suggestions for future video tutorials or whatever, then if you go to this page down here, you can submit your question or comment or whatever. If you are subscribed to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio channel on YouTube, thank you very much. If you're not, then please do click on the subscribe button down there below this video, so you can see any new videos that I post onto YouTube. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video next time. Bye for now.